Data Masters is the go-to place for data enthusiasts. We speak with data leaders from around the world about data, analytics, and the emerging technologies and techniques data-savvy organizations are tapping into to gain a competitive advantage. Our experts also share their opinions and perspectives about the hyped and overhyped industry trends we may all be geeking out over. Join the Data Masters podcast with your host, Anthony Dayton, Data Products General Manager at Tamer.
Welcome to another episode of Data Masters. Today's guest is Adam Wilson, Senior Vice President and General Manager for the Alteryx Analytics Cloud. Alteryx unifies analytics, data science, and business process automation in one end-to-end platform to accelerate digital transformation and shape the future of analytic process automation. Away from Alteryx, Adam keeps himself busy as a limited partner at Greylock and Ridge Ventures. He's also a Technology Executive Council member for the CNBC Technology Executive Council and an investor and strategic advisor for Mach 5 Software. Welcome, Adam.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I thought we would start at the very beginning, and we'll sort of talk about the founding story of the startup you founded, Trifacta. And listeners may or may not be aware that there's some overlap between the founding story of Trifacta and of Tamer. But maybe share in your words how you came to be a part of Trifacta and the sort of founding story of Trifacta.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting. So Trifacta was actually started as a joint research project between a professor at Stanford focused on human-computer interaction and visualization, and a professor at Berkeley that was focused on databases and distributed computing. So that was Jeff Hare and Joe Hellerstein, kind of luminaries in their areas. And they had a shared grad student, Sean Candell, who was doing work in and around this idea of, how do we enable people who know the data best to do some of this very, complex work around data wrangling. And I guess the tie to Tamer was that early on, Joe, who had been a student of Mike Stonebreaker along the way, were sitting around the kitchen table talking about how this was such a huge problem, and maybe it would make sense to even just do a company together focused on this. And as it played out, I think Joe felt very passionately about thinking through kind of how does the human in the loop? How do we really think about kind of a more of a co-pilot kind of approach to solving the problem? And I think Mike at the time, and this is again in the early origins of the of these companies, was a little more like, how do we get the machines to do more of the work? So there was a little bit of a philosophical difference in approach, although I think probably with the passage of time, elements of both ideas crept into both companies in pretty meaningful ways. But it was really, for Trifacta, those sort of early formative experience of like, how do we turn this into a user experience problem, kind of powered by machine learning, that led to Stanford Data Wrangler, which within, 6 months, there were 50,000 people using it. And that's when, our good friends at Excel and Greylock came knocking and said, hey guys, we think there's a real company here, not just an academic prototype. And it was professors took sabbaticals, and Sean wrapped up his degree in a hustle and jumped out, to do the company for real. So.
Yeah, and it was quite a ride. So you guys built an amazing product. I was actually a user of it in its early days. But then about a year and a half ago, Alteryx announced the acquisition of Trifacta. And now you've been working, as I suggested in the introduction, you've been working at Alteryx and really sort of bringing the two ideas, the concept of Alteryx and the concept of Trifacta together. And so maybe talk a little bit about what it means to bring these two companies together, how that's changed what you're doing and what the products are doing, and how the two really work together to add a lot of value from a customer's perspective.
Yeah, it was interesting for us along the way. So, over a, almost 8 or 9 year journey, from the original academic project to, bringing on first customers and, starting to really, finding product market fit, and then, beginning to scale the business and, signing up, strategic partnerships like Google, who brought Trifacta to market as a Google branded service, first time in their history they'd ever done that. There were all these amazing milestones along the way. And, but what was interesting is, as we were getting into accounts, and as we were starting to see meaningful expansion, Alteryx was in every account that we were in. And it was, but we didn't necessarily bump into them head to head a lot. And so it was obviously a very successful brand and company that I was very aware of. But they were landing with end users in the line of business. They were taking a lot of work they were typically doing with files and automating that in really meaningful ways. But like going to, people who looked, more like business users, accountants, researchers, analysts, and helping them understand, like, you can now create your own data products, and you can do that in a very self-service way. So again, very akin to a lot philosophically, a lot of where Trifacta, had come from, but yet we were going in through IT organizations. And so we were often part of data modernization initiatives where people were thinking about, what is cloud going to mean to data and analytics? And, how do I contend with increasingly larger and more complex data sets? And how am I going to use machine learning and AI to kind of speed up everything, and to, to allow us to take some of the most complicated things and automate those, because every data set's not a new data set. Odds are somebody has seen something like it before. And you can even learn as the user interacts with the data. And so we were kind of coming through IT with these modernization exercises. Alteryx had really won hearts and minds of end users, in the line of business. And so, when Mark and I first had a discussion, and we got connected through some shared connections in the VC world. There were board members that Mark had at Palo Alto Networks who were involved with Trifacta. They said, you guys should meet up. Mark had just taken the reins at Alteryx, and as we sat down, it was really interesting, because we were realizing, like, a lot of what we were trying to do was solving a lot of the same kinds of problems. Really. Shared a vision, for how we could democratize a lot of this work that had historically been the exclusive purview of the highly technical, but had been coming at it from very different ways. And so, for Mark, it was like, I want to accelerate everything we're doing with cloud, and go bigger, faster. And for Trifacta, it was like, hey, we've got this really great cloud solution, but we're a small company, we need awareness and distribution. And so it was a little like, this seems kind of perfect. And so pretty quickly, it went from, hey, maybe this is interesting, and maybe we can combine forces and help each other out in meaningful ways, to, over the course of, I don't know, about a 6-month period or so, becoming one company. And I think, for me personally, and for the entire Trifacta team, for the Trifacta customers, it's been amazing, to now come in, and now being part of a larger public company. Trifacta really became the foundation, the platform for Alteryx Analytics Cloud. So not just for prep and blend, but also for auto machine learning capabilities, auto insights capabilities, location intelligence capabilities, a lot of applications kind of plugging into that platform, and leveraging, the 8-9 years of hard knocks and experience that we'd sort of earned, in the market. And so a lot of that original thesis, very much played out. It's like, can this accelerate, not just in, weeks, months, and quarters, but literally in many years, the the ability to deliver meaningful and integrated, cloud solutions to the market. And so we've been super, super busy with that over the last, 12 months, and, have already launched better together offerings, based on this. And for us, also just saw, an ability to now do things, kind of in a bigger way, on a bigger stage, with increased investment, more specialization, that has been incredibly powerful for us. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy busy year one, as you can imagine, just all the sort of post integration things that happen in when you stitch together kind of two companies, two cultures, and a variety of technologies. But it's also been really, really rewarding. And I think we're headed to our user conference here later this month, and going to be unveiling, a whole set of new ideas and applications that, really came out of that collaboration, over the last 12 months. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So it sounds a lot like this idea of accelerating Alteryx moves in the cloud. That thesis really played out positively. And this idea that we want to empower, and I love this word, democratize. We want to sort of empower end users to work with data in a very tangible way through the user interface and through the experience, but take advantage of the scale and compute that you get on the cloud. Is that a fair way to sort of bring the two together?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, to some extent, if you think about self-service and you think about democratization broadly, a lot of it is about removing frictions and barriers, right? And cloud is great at that. All of a sudden, a whole bunch of the complexity that companies bump into, especially as the data volumes get larger, as the data diversity increases, you can leverage a lot of cloud services to sort of abstract from some of that, or at least inflect that back in a way that the end users don't have to contend with it so much. And so I think that has been it's been created a lot of opportunity then to sort of rethink, like, all right, well, where is this work being done? Who's doing this work? And how do we do it sort of most effectively and most efficiently? And so most of the organizations I talk to, are looking at, over the next few years, doing substantive portions of their data and analytics work in the cloud. It's interesting though, because not all, right? Meaning not so much. Most of the customers I talk to are, but not all of the work is contemplated to go to the cloud. Many of the larger organizations are pretty committed to hybrid, pretty committed to the idea that, like, hey, some of this is going to stay on-prem for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's, related to security. Sometimes it's just related to, certain internal processes and efficiencies that they gain by doing work on-prem. So you're seeing this kind of interesting blend where, more aggressive moves to the cloud than ever before. At the same time, some organizations retrenching, certain types of workloads around, doing that work kind of in their own data centers. So
interesting. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit. We've talked a little bit about Trifacta and now Alteryx. So if you step up a little bit and think about data in the enterprise. So you've talked about one trend, which is the move of data to the cloud, and you've pointed out, rightly so, I think, that it's really a hybrid approach, some data on the cloud, some data still on-prem. But if you step back and think about what you see going on in data and analytics today, so we've talked about one trend. What are some of the other trends that you see going on in data and analytics?
Well, I'm surprised we've gotten this far into the conversation without somebody saying ChatGPT or OpenAI. I was at dinner here in San Francisco the other night, and the waiter walked up to the table and was just kind of introducing himself and asked what line of work I was in. I said I work in technology, and he immediately started asking me about ChatGPT, and I was like, okay, if now this is like the dinner conversation I'm having with my waiter in San Francisco, like, that this has become pretty pervasive. So
it might have jumped the shark.
Yeah. So But yeah, no, I mean, I think, to me, I mean, this is very of the moment, but like you start looking at that as a trend. And so what are we doing, right? We're creating kind of even increasingly user-friendly interfaces, to do complex things. So not to oversimplify it, but the idea that, hey, this is going to replace some, kind of manual tasks, or going to enable a broader set of users to go in and, ask and answer more complex questions. I think that's pretty magical. And that's super exciting. I think that, I don't, people always, sort of ask, okay, well, does this replace people? Does it replace jobs? And I'm like, we've kind of seen these trends, more abstraction, more automation, more user friendly experiences. Kind of, we've seen waves of them over decades. Right. And in each case, it is tended to, replace, certain activities, often time intensive activities, often very painful and manual activities, but it's not a replacement for the creativity, of the person that ultimately is making the business decisions or asking the questions. And I think, for me, that's all, again, always been so core, which is like, context matters, the ability for people to think creatively matters. And there's a lot of distance between questions and ideas, and being able to kind of get at the data that will help, welcome uncertainty into your business, cater to long tail segments in your market, manage and model risk better. And anything we can do to close that gap is beneficial, and frees people up, to then, again, implement a lot of the, the business insights, and to take action on those insights. And so I think I just sort of look at it as yet another thing that we will sort of add to our arsenal. And I think that the market is trying to figure out how to do that in a responsible way, because the technology is changing so quickly, and there's so much, heat on this right now that, I talked to the CTO of a major bank last week who just said, we shut it all down because we just don't fully understand it yet. And there's right now we're more worried about the risk than the benefit, but he believes deeply that there is benefit, but he's kind of looking for the ecosystem, companies like Tamer and Alteryx and others to kind of, that are trusted, that have been in there doing a lot of this kind of work for them for many, many years, to help demystify, help integrate and incorporate, and kind of help them adopt this in a responsible way. And so I think the ecosystem, a lot of us that are sort of on the bleeding edge, or more avant-garde, have to really help a lot of these large organizations, start to think about ways in which they're going to get real benefits from it, but in a way that, still, provides the kinds of governance and protection and controls that highly regulated, environments like, banks and healthcare companies are gonna need. So
I think that's a really good point. Maybe a slightly different way of saying that is, it's in the application of these technologies that we see their real value, and organizations are struggling with figuring out how to apply them. And the other, I think, important insight you're sharing there is where we see automation and artificial intelligence stepping in, and is actually removing the worst and most boring work that we do, which I think is very consistent with, what the Alteryx Analytics Cloud is doing, what Tamer is doing, what Trifacta started to do, which is in general, working with data is a complete pain. It's boring, it's repetitive, it's frustrating, it's time consuming. And if we could just not do that and actually focus energy on the interesting problem of, looking at our business and understanding margins, or whatever the problem of the moment is, that'd actually probably be better.
yeah. I mean, we always used to talk about how, at Trifacta, we were very, very proudly data janitors, and I think for us, this was this idea of hey, it all starts with the data. I think this this recent trend underscores that massively, right? Like if your data quality is bad, then your machine learning, your AI, your algorithms are worthless. And I think that this does create a burning platform to also like really start to think, more comprehensively about, how you're building your data products. How, it starts to be a game of like who's got access to the most interesting sets of data and can bring those data sets together as quickly as possible in order to, again, get to unique insights. And and so, and God forbid that, if you start automating using AI, start automating bad decisions faster based on bad data, right? Like, I mean, that
just the disaster just happens faster.
yeah, that's right. So you have to be really careful of that. And it's there's an example that I've shared in the past, again, going back to banking, but we worked pretty closely with an algorithmic trading group. And, they were like, listen, these are data driven, data savvy people, but they're not necessarily structured programmers. But they're like, I have a voracious appetite for different cuts of data combined in new and interesting ways, because that will birth algorithms that I can trade on. And if I'm a little faster, I don't just win a little more of it. Like I win all of it for some period of time until everybody else catches up to what I'm doing. And so this is where you start seeing that like the frontier for competition now becomes, can I find new and interesting data? Can I onboard that new and interesting data? Can I start to like stitch it together in ways that will create training sets that, that will birth algorithms, or that I can run across, to get these unique insights. And if you can speed that process up, that's not just an operational savings, like do more with less message. That's a top line, beat your competition and win more share, and, do better for your customers, kind of message. And I think that's ultimately really powerful. So I think these trends that we're seeing right now just, put an exclamation point on the importance of the data strategy, the, kind of the data platforms and foundations, the being able to do these things at scale, and really emphasizes things like data quality more and more. So.
Yeah, no, amazing points. And another element of the GPT phenomenon is the chat part of the chat GPT. And this is one I think doesn't get talked about as much, but the very fact that you might have a waiter in San Francisco, or a random family member talking to you about engaging with a large language model in this specific instance through a chat interface, means that this idea of artificial intelligence to for people to engage with it on a daily basis, to do things like write poems and silly things almost, it takes it out of the scientific department and puts it into into the general public. And that's a little bit of, I think, when we see these technologies become widely adopted, is when they become something that everybody sort of understands, and you understand things by playing with them. So with that as a backdrop, and you're also involved in a number of different venture funds. It's an interesting time, as they say. It's a euphemism in the VC space today. I'm curious on what you see going on in venture capital. Is anyone getting funding? And maybe even in the data and analytics space generally, like what kinds of, beyond GPTs and large language models, what you see going on in the VC space?
Well, what's interesting is that, I don't know, what you read a lot about these days is how there's a sort of an extinction event that's happening, and, nobody can get financed, and, everyone, probably didn't slow down their burn fast enough, were sort of overvalued and under ARR'd. And, so now it's just creating all these like, negative effects, and making it really hard on organizations. And I think certainly there's a lot of truth to a bunch of that, right? So that's not, but the one thing that I think is specifically interesting in this area of data and AI is that, there is there is an emerging, idea that um, a whole new class of applications is going to be born out of this, and that if you weren't built from the ground up with these fundamental assumptions of what can be done with large language models and what can be done with with some of these new interfaces, that um, that it may be that um, some of the legacy CRM applications, SFA applications, will have a hard time bolting that on, and being competitive. It's like, what if your HR systems could tell you, when, when people, should are likely to leave, or could tell you when it's time to think about, promoting them, and it could recommend skills that they needed to develop, and training and curriculum. Like, can you, can you actually sort of take something that sort of doesn't start with data and analytics from an application layer at its core, and with AI sort of at its core, and thinking about, like, in every single place where that could make whatever you're doing now better, faster, stronger, and can you sort of layer that in, to some of these applications that are, been around now for 20, 30, even more, longer periods of time. And so I think there's excitement in the venture community that this is going to bring on another sort of wave of disruption, that where you can build some meaningful, scalable businesses. And I think that's the stuff that VCs always get super excited about, is these moments in time where you just see these secular megatrends or these market shifts that occur, and it's not just about feeding the incumbents all the time. So I think it's, in that sense, it's a really exciting time. That being said, and there's plenty of capital out there. It's not, especially with, what's been going on in the markets right now, people are looking for places to put money to get return. I think, the hard part though is that everyone's having to, like, be much more grounded and realistic about, what it's going to mean to raise around, what valuations are going to be. And so I think, adjusting expectations there is going to be crucial. I think you're seeing a lot of organizations too that, private equity becomes a viable option if they're out there, because they're going to need to sort of recap and reset, or they're going to need to combine forces and get stitched together with other assets in order to create something kind of more meaningful and more substantive. I think the days of, like, thin slicing the analytics stack, which was, again, I think also a VC fed thing, where it was like, hey, in order to do anything end to end, you're going to need 15 different products. And every one of these products all kind of said, yeah, you need one of me and then one of them and one of them. Like, I think those days are gone as well, where organizations are like, that's just too complicated. That's the tool chain kind of exploded, too much, too fast. And there's too much headache and kind of coordinating across all of that. And so you're starting to see platforms become more prominent, and organizations that have, some critical mass, where they can make long-term bets and then start to layer in other capabilities over time, become more prevalent. And so I don't know, those are a few of the trends that I guess I'm seeing. So I don't know if that matches, what you're seeing as well.
It definitely does. And so this move to startups needing to be more thoughtful about how they generate revenue and how they find customers and how they actually bring these technology to market is also maps nicely to the need for these technologies to solve real problems. So, just because you've built artificial intelligence or a machine learning model in itself isn't interesting. To use your example, if you apply it to the domain of your example, human resources, now it starts to get interesting, because now I don't care that it actually uses machine learning under the cover. I understand that it solves a problem I have with retention or turnover. Great, that's a problem I'm willing to pay for. And at its core, all of these things are really about taking advantage of the data that the enterprise is generating having better, meaningful and scalable ways of being able to use that data to make better decisions and be more effective in the job. So, probably this is a return to some version of normalcy, which itself will be a useful filter and accelerant to real innovation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's and to your point about, you think about all the interesting applications around, fraud and detection and insurance adjustment and cancer research and claims adjudication and, it's just like the richness of what's going to happen I think in the app space, but specifically in sort of the either vertical or kind of functional domains. I think, there's going to be a whole bunch of ready problems where the degree of automation is going to just increase like massively, right? And but it's going to be very targeted, it's going to be very specialized, and it's going to be incredibly powerful. And I think that again I think that's super exciting. I think it's exciting for sort of everybody broadly. But I think, coming back to your original question, I think that's particularly compelling in the venture space right now. And you're starting to see a lot of early stage investments in companies that are taking, that kind of approach. It's not lost on me as well that for those of us who are, kind of broadly in the data space, like, we're sort of arms dealers to that segment as well, right? Because like every single one of those products, those applications, those vertical initiatives all need to be able to get the data together quickly. They need to be able to like make sure the data is appropriately cleaned, but then also it's like even generating some of the insights. Like, we get to a point now in one of the products that I'm very involved in at Alteryx is an auto insights product. And the whole thesis is like, why can't the data sets tell you what's most interesting about them? Like, why do you have to wander the data set, or why do you have to stumble across the dashboard that might have the answer to a question that you have? Like, why can't just this be continually happening where as new data comes in, the data sets are surfacing kind of what's, where are the anomalies, where are the trends? They're already doing all the dimensional analysis for you and coming back and saying, these are the things we think you ought to pay attention to, right? Or this is where you should probably dig in. It's like that kind of thing, that kind of automation, kind of moves beyond, kind of static reports and dashboards and moves beyond, what you've historically seen and really empowers, again, the end user now. It gives them a running start and gives them like a place to sort of focus their exploration. And I just think, to me, that's the really interesting stuff that you're starting to see happen that I think is going to be transformational to what's going on in analytics.
Yeah, heavily dependent on machine learning and the cloud. I mean, ultimately, those are the enabling technologies that allow these differentiated user experiences to blossom and to be available. Well, look, Adam, a real pleasure. I appreciate you sharing the founding story of Trifacta and the journey to Alteryx and the interesting success that you've been having together and to really help to transform the data and analytics space, and some interesting commentary on the venture community and what's going to take us into the future. So thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to reconnect, and certainly a lot of fun.
Data Masters is brought to you by Tamer, the leader in data products. Visit tamer.com to learn how Tamer helps data teams quickly improve the quality and accuracy of their customer and company data. Be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Tamer, thanks for listening.